Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 10, Episode 9. There's no business like no business.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in There's No Business Like No Business.
We open at Cunningham Hardware. It's snowing outside, and inside, Potsy demands a raise from Howard. Instead, Howard fires him.
One of us has got to go.
I didn't know things were that bad. What do you want to do, draw straws?
Ever since that new mall opened, business has been sparse. Potsy offers to keep working for him for free, but Howard can't let him do that. He asks for Potsy's keys, but Potsy already lost them by the docks.
Don't worry, it has the store's name and address on them.
Potsy heads down to Arnold's, where he tells Fonzie and Roger about Howard's business troubles, and that he got a new job at Nails and Pails at the mall.
They got a bowling team, a dental plan, and I get to take a lie detector test.
Fonzie, feeling bad for Howard, goes to comfort him. Marion and Casey are home from Christmas shopping, where they meet Joni, visiting from Chicago.
You weren't supposed to come home till next week.
Well, I finished with my finals early and I couldn't wait to get here. Oh, by the way, Chachi sends his love.
They gush to Joni about the new mall, and she and Casey go upstairs. Howard gets home, and he's disappointed that Marion went shopping at Nails and Pails.
You went shopping at Nails and Pails?
Well, you know, Howard, all the stores are so close together, and, I'll never go there again.
When Casey and Joni come down, Howard wants to return Casey's new dress, and insists on not going out for dinner. Fonzie enters and blurts out that Howard is on the brink of financial disaster. Prompted by Marion, Howard admits that Cunningham Hardware has to close. His family tries to comfort him, but to no avail. He admits that he was offered space in the mall and turned it down, and now he's paying the price.
I've taken a perfectly good business and thrown it right into the sewer.
Joni admits to Fonzie she's seen her father angry, but never scared. He comforts her.
He lost his confidence for now. Sold his small, put him on his duff for now.
And says he'll make sure the store doesn't go down. The next day, Cunningham Hardware is having a sale at Fonzie's direction. They're staying open longer than Nails and Pails, and offering lower prices.
The mall stays open till late, you stay open till 10. They drop their prices 15%, you drop them 20%.
Now listen, I may be losing my business, but I am not losing my mind.
Howard doesn't think he can compete, but Fonzie reminds him Nails and Pails hired Potsy. Business starts to pick up, but Howard isn't happy. Every customer is someone Fonzie brought in. After closing, Howard says he appreciates it, but Fonzie can't bring in people every day. Fonzie disagrees.
I have people here tomorrow morning. When they run out of money, I'll have more people. When they run out, there's always Europe.
Howard talks about finding a new job to Marion, maybe at Nails and Pails. Then he remembers that would mean he'd be working for Potsy.
Oh my God, I could be working for Potsy.
Marion assures him that even if it's the end of Cunningham Hardware, it's not the end of Howard Cunningham, and she loves him no matter what. Howard stays behind to close up.
No, I'm sure nothing bad has happened. Oh, I'm sure something bad has happened.
Oh, Aunt Marion.
I don't know what to tell you, Mrs. C. I asked everybody. I've been everywhere. Nobody's seen him.
Hi.
Howard shows up at home hours later, newly energized, and he tells Marion he stopped by their old apartment and had an idea. He's moving the business into a new location that used to be a pet store. It'll be expensive, and they'll have to refinance the house after they just finished paying off a 20-year mortgage, but it'll be worth it.
Can we refinance the house?
Oh, Howard, of course we can.
The next day, Howard comes home for dinner, joyfully discussing floor plans for the new store. Potsy enters, having heard the good news, and asks when he starts. After asking who told him, Howard welcomes Potsy back.
Welcome back, Potsy.
Thank you, Peter. That was There's No Business Like No Business. It first aired back on December 7th, 1982. Happy Days was followed that night by a brand new Laverne and Shirley, in which Laverne's boyfriend, Weezer, played by Jim Belushi, feels like a wimp when he can't defend Laverne and himself from some punks. CBS aired a new installment of Bring 'Em Back Alive. This week, a wily thief escapes from prison and ends up chained to our hero, Frank Buck. Frank and the thief must then deliver a priceless necklace to some crooks. And NBC had a new episode of Father Murphy. This week, Murphy runs into some trouble when a storyteller he encounters on a freight run convinces an entire town that Murphy is a bank robber. Then the real robber shows up. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I think I might have to go with Bring 'Em Back Alive this week.
I'm actually also going with Bring 'Em Back Alive. The idea of the hero being chained to a thief Sounds kind of exciting.
It's very Defiant Ones.
I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's kind of a buddy picture. I've seen the opening credits, and it looks to be like a modern-day Defiant Ones. Isn't that right, Frank?
There's No Business Like No Business was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by John B. Collins and Paula A. Roth. Paula, we have discussed several times before. She wrote Empty Nest earlier this season, for instance. John is new to Happy Days, but he had exactly the kind of resume you would expect. A lot of 80s and 90s sitcoms. He started on the writing staff of Mork and Mindy, and he stayed there for a year. He went on to The Love Boat, Webster, Perfect Strangers, Charles in Charge, and Step by Step. By the 90s, he had worked his way up to producing. As for guest stars this week, not much. We have Daniel J. Foster as Pete, a customer who is threatened by Fonzie and buys 4 hammers.
They are so much easier when you buy them than if you digest them.
Four, I'll take 4.
Daniel is the son of comedian Phil Foster, who played Frank DeFazio on Laverne and Shirley.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Last night I was tired, so I owe you 2.
Danny did a cameo on that show, too. Peter, any thoughts about Daniel J. Foster as Pete, the customer?
Not really, no, but I'm glad he's there.
It's kind of neat that Phil Foster's son is on the show. Jerry Paris himself makes an uncredited cameo as the guy who wants directions to the mall.
Well, I've been looking all over the place. Can you tell me how to get to the mall?
It's a small but memorable part.
It's fun to have Jerry Paris on the show for a few seconds. Erin Moran is billed as a guest star in this episode and gets her own special credit during the theme song. In case you're wondering, Joni Loves Chachi survived to the bitter end of the 1982-83 television season, so Joni still has a few more months left in Chicago.
I guess with the retrospect that Joni Loves Chachi was going to end very quickly, it's a good thing that they kept bringing Aaron and Scott back, keeping their options open.
Yeah, you don't want to lose Joni and Chachi permanently just because the spinoff fails. As for songs, almost nothing. At Arnold's, we hear Easier Said Than Done by the Essex. That's about it.
Easier said than done.
As for cultural and historical references this week, obviously this episode is named after There's No Business Like Show Business, a classic show tune written by Irving Berlin for the 1946 musical Annie Get Your Gun, starring Ethel Merman. In 1953, Ethel herself sang that song on live television to an audience of 60 million people.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing. Everything the traffic will allow.
Peter, any particular thoughts about the song There's No Business Like Show Business?
Great song, less good movie, even if it did have Ethel Merman, Donald O'Connor, and Marilyn Monroe.
The plot of this episode revolves around the rise of shopping malls. Shopping centers have been around since automobiles became commonplace in the early 20th century, but the first fully enclosed malls didn't appear until the mid-1950s. One of the oldest, perhaps the oldest, was the Valley Fair Shopping Center in Appleton, Wisconsin. It opened in 1955. From there, malls started popping up across America, growing alongside suburbs and highways. Eventually, by the 1970s and 80s, malls became town centers where people came not only to shop, but to eat, drink, socialize, and even exercise.
It's just like my dad always says.
For an evening or a week, there's no place like the mall. Food, fun, and fashion, the mall has it all.
What? What did he say?
Malls started to fall into decline in the 2000s, however, due to the rise of online shopping. Even the Valley Fair Shopping Center has closed and was demolished several years ago. Peter, I have to ask, what is your experience with malls and mall culture? Was it totally gone by your childhood, or were the vestiges still around?
The vestiges of mall culture were still around when I was growing up. There is a mall, like, within driving distance of my house, and I visited there now and then. I still go there sometimes if I need to get Christmas presents or something. But yeah, by that point, mall culture was just barely hanging on.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s during the very height of mall culture, so the Genesee Valley Shopping Center in Flint, Michigan was a major part of my childhood.
Genesee Valley Center, a unique collection of 130 stores, including over 60 you won't find anywhere else in town. Flint's one of a kind.
Going there was an afternoon or an evening. You could shop for clothes and music and eat at the food court. It was a whole world, and it's almost all gone now. In a way, it's sad, but in another way, malls were driving out small businesses like Cunningham Hardware, so they were also kind of bad.
Yeah,
so,
it's the circle of life. Or capitalism.
Like when Blockbuster drove out the mom and pop video stores and then they got destroyed by Netflix. Arnold tells the fish that they swim all their lives, but they can never make it to the Olympics.
Oh, you poor little things. You swim all your lives and you can't make it to the Olympics.
Their next opportunity would have been the 1964 Summer Games in Tokyo. This was the first time the Olympics had ever been held in Asia. The United States dominated the swimming events that year with 29 medals. Peter, do you watch the Olympics when they show up on TV at all?
Nope.
I'm not a big Olympic watcher myself, but I mentioned those Tokyo Olympics from 1964 because there's a great documentary called Tokyo Olympiad about them that I highly recommend.
Ooh.
Marion and Casey watched the Clydesdales dance on their hind legs at the mall.
Oh, but Casey, how often do you get to see the Clydesdales dance on their hind legs?
Since 1933, the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company has been using teams of Clydesdale horses for promotions and commercials. These animals are often referred to as the Budweiser Clydesdales. Peter, were you even familiar with the Clydesdales from the Budweiser ads?
I was not.
They don't use them that much in the advertising anymore, but for decades, Budweiser beer and Clydesdale horses, which are these giant draft horses from Scotland, were synonymous.
Oh, wow.
It's been a while since their last appearance, but it's baseball season, which means one thing in St. Louis. Please welcome the majestic hometown Budweiser Clydesdales.
Casey says she bought an A-line dress with a Peter Pan collar.
Oh, and I got the cutest little A-line dress with a little white Peter Pan collar. Come on upstairs and I'll show it to you. Okay.
The A-line is a type of dress that is fitted at the shoulders and hips, but widens at the hem, giving the wearer the shape of the letter A. It was introduced by designer Christian Dior in 1955 and remained popular through the 1960s and 70s. As for the Peter Pan collar, it goes back to a 1905 Broadway production of the play Peter and Wendy, starring an actress named Maude Adams, not the same Maude Adams from the James Bond movie. The collar, which is large and flat with rounded corners, was designed by John White Alexander. And I believe we actually do get to see the Peter Pan collar on the A-line dress in this episode.
We do. Casey is wearing it during the scene where the family finds out about Howard's money problems.
It's beautiful.
Aunt Marion bought it for me.
You better take it off before you spill something on it.
What did you think?
It's a cute dress.
And it's very modest, which fits with Casey's image. According to Marion, Howard said, "Hula hoops may come and go, but hardware is forever." Hoops have been used as both toys and props for dancing for centuries around the world, but they didn't become a fad until 1958 when the Whammo company introduced a plastic version called the hula hoop.
Yes, it's hula hula everywhere, from the parties of the Park Avenue Smart Set to sweethearts who want to be married in the swing of things.
The hula hoop fad was very brief, but the toys have never totally gone away. Did you or anyone you know have a hula hoop?
We had like a bunch of them at school, but I never had one because I was really bad at hula hoops.
I've never been able to make a hula hoop do whatever a hula hoop is supposed to do, although I think we just had one in our garage for some reason. Fonzie says that salty tears are very, very bad for my leather.
Salty tears are very, very bad for my leather.
This is true. Salt water can be devastating to leather, making it dry, cracked, and stained. It can even break down the bonds that hold leather together. So don't cry on someone's leather jacket.
Go cry on somebody else's shoulder.
Fonzie compares Howard and the Mall to the Lone Ranger and the Cavendish Gang.
You know, it's like the Lone Ranger and the Cavendish Gang. You know, when they ambushed him and left him with his buddies there, and they left him for dead?
As a reminder, the Lone Ranger started as a Texas Ranger named John Reed in the 1800s. He and his fellow Rangers were led into an ambush by a group of criminals called the Cavendish Gang, who killed all the Rangers except for the one they accidentally left alive. That one became the Lone Ranger. And Fonzie says that the Lone Ranger came out with guns blazing.
They came out with guns blazing, right?
That is not true. John Reed was pretty messed up in the ambush, and he actually had to be nursed back to health by
Tonto.
And that's how they became friends. Howard says he visited his and Marion's old apartment on Bradley Street.
And I found myself in front of our old apartment on Bradley Street.
There's no Bradley Street in Milwaukee. There is a Brady Street, though. And it's supposedly a center of nightlife in Milwaukee. So if you're in Milwaukee, visit Brady Street, I guess. Fonzie says, "Don't let the bedbugs bite."
Hey, don't let the bedbugs bite.
The origins of this phrase are surprisingly controversial and the subject of multiple urban legends, but it seems to go back to New England in the late 1800s when bedbugs were a genuine menace. Hopefully, bedbugs have never been a part of your life. I've never had to deal with them. Peter, any thoughts on bedbugs?
I don't like them.
Don't let the bedbugs bite. Bedbugs?
I'm going to do a speed run through the inspirational sayings in this episode.
Remember, every cloud has a silver lining.
Remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. Remember the Alamo.
Every cloud has a silver lining. This goes back to English poet John Milton in 1634, though his version is more eloquent. Was I deceived, or did a sable cloud turn forth her silver lining on the night? It's always darkest before the dawn. This proverb also goes back to England in the 1600s. It was originally said by English theologian Thomas Fuller in 1650. Incidentally, science says that no, it is not darkest just before dawn. The brightness of the sky depends on the appearance of the moon and the presence or absence of man-made lighting. Remember the Alamo. This phrase was used as a rallying cry to get men to join the Texian army after General Santa Anna and his soldiers raided the Alamo, a Spanish mission in San Antonio, Texas in 1836. Fonzie says there were no survivors.
KC, there were no survivors there.
No adult male Anglo-Texan present on March 6, 1836 survived the attack. However, numerous other members of the garrison did escape death. At least a dozen soldiers survived the siege as couriers.
All right, we got a problem here. Where there is a will, there is a way. Dig it?
Where there's a will, there's a way. This too goes back to England in the 1600s. Specifically, writer and priest George Herbert. His version was, "To him that will, ways are not wanting, and the ship is never sunk until the captain's nose is under the water."
The ship is not sunk until the captain's nose is under the water, huh?
That last one was written for this episode of Happy Days, but it is a maritime tradition that the captain of a ship is the last to be rescued. This tradition actually goes back several years before the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. Okay, so Peter, I just went through a bunch of inspirational sayings, and I'm going to ask you to rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10 on how inspirational they are or how inspired you were by them, okay?
Okay.
So every cloud has a silver lining, 1 to 10.
6.
It's a 2 for me. It's always darkest before the dawn.
I'm going to say 7. It's good to remember that things sometimes get better after they get worse.
I'm going to give it a 5 just because it appears in the song Dedicated to the One I Love by the Mamas and Papas.
And the darkest hour is just before dawn.
Remember the Alamo.
1. It's weird that one is an inspirational saying. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on whether you're white or Mexican. Because, you know, if you're Mexican, I'm sure it is very inspiring to remember the Alamo. Even if the war was ultimately lost, I'm very sorry about that, Mexico.
For me, it's a 1. When I think of the Alamo, I just think of Pee Wee Herman getting his bike stolen.
That's probably better than the war.
Yeah, it's a nicer way to remember it.
I remember the Alamo.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
5, it's neither particularly inspiring or anti-inspiring, it's just a statement.
It's another 2 for me, I'm sorry. And the ship is never sunk until the captain's nose is under the water.
A little bit more desperate than inspiring, I'm going to say 2.
That was a 10 for me. That's the only one that worked.
Oh.
Maybe it's because it's the funniest one. So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
Well, we already talked about Casey's A-line dress with the Peter Pan collar. It was very cute. And I really liked the shirt that Marianne was wearing at the hardware store. And after that, it's this very pretty, kind of a dark pink shirt. It's a little bit puffy. I really liked it.
I'm going to guess that Marianne has a pretty big closet full of outfits. She has quite a wardrobe. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
This was a decent enough episode. I feel like it could have been just a bit better with some rewrites, but as it is, it's surprisingly fun. In the last scene before the tag, Marion gets off some really good jokes, mostly related to Howard bringing up the pet store he saw. Howard, you don't know anything about the pet business, and it's going to be really expensive to relocate the store, especially since you have to get rid of the dog smell. I really enjoyed those. I also really liked her reassuring Howard that even if he has to close Cunningham Hardware, the thing that he has built his identity around for literal decades, she'll still love him. I really like that part. And I also really loved the running gag of Fonzie insisting that he wants to be one of the people to comfort Howard because, hey, he's part of the family.
In this episode, I think he even calls himself one of the members of the immediate family, which was exciting.
Which means that he outranks Joni and Casey. Amazing.
This episode was surprisingly effective on me. It's one of the more sad and sentimental episodes of the show. Obviously, Cunningham Hardware has been a part of the series since the very beginning, and it's sad to see the business go. But this is commenting on something that was really happening in America at the time in the 1960s and was only going to get worse in the 1970s and 80s, that malls were driving these small businesses out, and people were abandoning the downtown areas of cities to go out to the suburbs and go to the malls. Roger, of all characters, has a little speech about that, about how they can't deal with the national chains.
Yes, and I'll tell you something, it's happening all over. You see, the small mom and pop entrepreneurs, they can't compete with the altering patterns of urban demographics or the large national franchise operations.
No, I think it's because everyone's shopping at the mall.
This was something that was really happening. This affected my family a little bit, I guess, because we had our own small business when I was a kid. My mother and grandmother had a children's clothing store called the Seesaw. That was a big part of our childhood. We were in a mall, but it was more of a shopping center. It wasn't an enclosed mall. So it was interesting to see Howard, who is normally a tower of strength on this show, be shaken down to his core by the potential failure of Cunningham Hardware and losing this thing that his identity, as you said, is tied to. This is a more of a sentimental and lovey-dovey, fuzzy-wuzzy kind of episode. So it's not a farce. It's not one of the laugh-a-minute episodes, but I think it's an emotional one that people should definitely see. And I hope Cunningham Hardware City does well. Do we ever see that version of the business?
I don't remember, but I hope so. The pet store that Howard is relocating the hardware store to was called Pet City, and in order to save money, he's keeping the city part of the sign, which, good for him.
Hey, those signs are expensive. We kept the Seesaw sign for years in our basement. I don't know whatever happened to it, but I think we eventually sold it to another business. Yeah, all in all, I will say There's No Business Like No Business is an episode that people should see. It's almost a Christmas episode because there's snow and there's some mentions of Christmas, but we get a real Christmas episode coming up.
Yes.
So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysarOursPodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, as you said, it's a Christmas episode. Heather asks Santa to help her mother and her grandparents reconcile. Meanwhile, Howard's brother and Casey's dad comes to visit in All I Want for Christmas.
That sounds like a jam-packed episode, and we will settle one of the great debates in baseball history. It all happens next week on the podcast, so see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Hey girl, gather around, pick up the water I'm putting down. Ooh, baby, I'm your handy man. I'm not the kind that use a pencil or rule. I'm handy with the love and I'm no fool. I fix broken hearts, I know I really can. If your broken hearts need repair, I'm the man to see. I whisper sweet things, you tell all your friends, they'll come running to me. Here is the main thing I want to say. I'm busy 24 hours a day. I fix broken hearts, I know I really can.
Oh, my God, I could be working for Potsy.